Hello everyone. Today I wanted to talk to you about cycles and behavioral patterns, habits that you may have gotten yourself into that you kind of want to get yourself out of, or just situations that you seem to keep getting yourself into and you're just like, why does this keep happening? Well, it's actually pretty simple because the brain works in patterns and cycles. The neurons fire in certain ways and the behaviors and the feelings associated with that are natural. So naturally, when we've been doing something for a long time, our neurons are used to it. They're like, oh yeah, this. You could almost do it in a way that's so automatic that you barely even recognize you're doing it, which is how we kind of fall into bad habits sometimes, like nail biting or, excessive drinking or things like that. It just kind of becomes something that is of a norm for us. And naturally, our brain doesn't see anything wrong with that because it's firing in the way that it's supposed to be firing. Now, in order to alter and change those behavioral patterns and cycles, what you have to do is almost go against the grain. And that's going to feel kind of uncomfortable. It's going to be different. Your brain's going to be like, what? No, that's not the way we fire. That's not the way we go. But over time, when you see results, then you're really going to notice a difference. So let's say, for instance, I'm going to use a personal example here. I was a nail biter for years. For years and years and years, I bit my nails unconsciously. I couldn't stop. I really didn't care to stop. I was just like, well, what's the big deal? I don't see any difference. So I bit my nails. And then when I went to school to do nails and things like that, I started painting them every day, and I looked at them and I saw how pretty they were, and I'm like, oh yeah, I don't want to bite them. So I continuously kept polish on them as a conscious recognition of, look how nice this is, look at how good this feels, look at all this stuff. And it took me months. And that's not to say that I don't relapse every once in a while when I'm really nervous. I bite my nails still, but it took me months to change that behavioral pattern because I had to literally focus and be like, no, I can't do that. No, I can't do that. It's almost like recorrecting the neurons in your brain, redirecting them to a different thought or a different way of coping with the oral fixation, coping with the cycle and the pattern. So by doing that, I got to see visual results. And I think that that's where a lot of people tend to get very frustrated because sometimes they don't actually see the results taking form right away. And so they tend to get frustrated and give up before they even really realize that there really was a difference happening. It was just too subtle to notice. So when you think about eating healthy or getting fit, the first week you're like, yeah, let's do this, let's get fit, let's get all this stuff done. So naturally you kind of start on this cycle, but you start to feel discouraged because you're like, oh, I'm not losing weight fast enough, I don't feel healthy enough, I still don't feel better, what's going on? I must need to try something different. And that's kind of where people kind of get really caught up in these cycles of falling back into their old patterns because they're just so discouraged before they see the visual results. Now, understanding lifestyle changes, it's a lifestyle change. It really is. And when you work to change that, it's going to feel uncomfortable and it's going to feel different. But once you fall into the pattern of gravitating towards that more healthy behavior, then you tend to see more results and you definitely stick to more of a long-term sort of behavioral change. So for instance, let's say that in relationships, you get into toxic relationships with the wrong type of people. The type of people that you gravitate towards are people that need help or people that are leaning on you too much, and it's just an unhealthy dynamic in general. So naturally, that's what feels comfortable to you. So if you grew up in an environment where you had a parental structure like that, or you had a structure where you felt like you had to be the caretaker of everything, that's a natural cycle that your brain kind of fires in. So it's like, oh, okay, I've done this before. I know what I'm doing. I know how to do this or whatever. And then you just kind of deal with the emotional stress that comes along with that, in a way, almost choosing that behavior and choosing that pattern because that's what you're used to, right? Nothing wrong with that, aside from the fact that you're the only one that's suffering from this. The thing that you're going to have to do if you want to change that is choose somebody that's totally out of the norm. And that's not to say that you can't find enjoyment in their company. That's not to say that they're going to be totally black and white, not emotionally available, not emotionally attentive, but somebody that's actually going to respond to your needs and kind of give and take the same. And that's going to feel really weird. It's going to be like, oh my God, what? You're trying to take care of me? No, go away. That's not how it works here. That's not how it works. And so you kind of almost block people out. You almost shut them out because you're like, no, this is not normal. This isn't something that I'm used to. Ew, get away. And so again, we get trapped in the cycle. So we go with what feels comfortable, but that's not necessarily what feels good to us in the long run. And there are ways that you can alter and change those behavior patterns and those cycles that you do go through conscious recognition that that's what they are. They're cycles and they're patterns, and diverting from those patterns and cycles is going to feel really weird. Like, imagine if you went and, you're right-handed, you open everything with your right hand. Imagine opening it with your left. It's going to feel weird, but it makes you more aware. By changing what you're doing, it's making you more aware because it's different. Rather than following the automatic cycles of your brain, I'm sure we've all had it. We're driving a place that we've driven to a million times. We arrive and we're like, who's been driving for the last 20 minutes? I don't know. Because we're so used to it. Unless there's some external stimulus that allows us to be like, oh, hey, like, whoa, like this is different. I need to pay more attention to this. It almost allows us to be more mindful in what we're doing in our patterns and our cycles by changing it up, by switching it up. And I think that that's important. And now it's certainly important to have your daily rituals and things like that, but never be afraid to kind of divert. When you divert from these patterns and these cycles, it allows you to almost see from the outside of it and be like, okay, this is different. Let's see how am I gonna target this differently. So even in obstacles in life, rather than seeing them as something that's uncomfortable, like, oh God, I don't want to, this is an obstacle, I don't want to deal with this right now. Be like, oh, this is actually giving me a chance to see things differently. This is actually giving me a chance to kind of step back from myself, observe the situation, and make different choices, which is very exciting in itself because it kind of allows a very dynamic and breathable flow of life rather than just having this one rigid structure. Because often when we get trapped in this rigid structure, when we divert from the structure that we've so carefully created, we get very anxious. We're just like, oh no, like that's not what I usually do. I don't like this. This is not normal. And it leads way to a lot of like mental stress, unnecessary mental stress, where you can be living a life where you're enjoying the curves and the flows and the ebb and flows and the new experiences that you're having. By going against your fear, by going against that intrinsic need to have much of the sameness and stability, it's actually creating a lot of conflict. Now, of course, I'm not telling you to go like change your life every single day, like something drastic or crazy. But what I am encouraging you to do is to just change these little things and to almost like take a look at yourself and see what kind of patterns do you have. Like, do you have breakfast every morning? Do you open the door with your left hand? Do you brush your teeth with your right hand? Do you do things a certain way every day? And you kind of notice those types of things. And of course, some of them aren't necessarily relevant, like what hand you brush your teeth with or what hand you open the door with. But those are like simple little ritualistic things that can kind of help make you more conscious throughout the day so that you can kind of see bigger issues and things like that and allow yourself to change some of those deeper ingrained patterns that have more emotional attachment to them. By changing these little tiny rituals, you can kind of learn to target the bigger rituals. But the bigger rituals do not change overnight. They do not change overnight. They can take weeks, months, years, but it's almost a conscious recognition of almost bringing yourself back to that space of mindfulness and being like, right, this is something that I wanted to alter and change. So even if like you're trying to change your diet, for instance, and you're doing it little by little, and then you kind of just totally mess up for like a week, don't quit. Okay, that's normal because your brain is like, oh, like something happens. Let's say you're on a diet, you're feeling good, something really stressful happens, and then you kind of go back to your old ways for like a week straight, and then you're thinking, oh, like I totally messed up, I can't do this, there's no way I can do this. No, that is normal because that is your brain defaulting to your comforts and to what feels right for you. So because you're under a particular stress, you have a harder time changing those behavioral patterns. But you are able to navigate if you stay persistent with them. And I totally 100% believe in you. You can do this. You're wonderful and you got this. Day by day, little by little. Don't be so hard on yourself. It is really hard to change behaviors and patterns, especially when you've been doing them for years. So yeah, I have faith in you. You should have faith in yourself. And if you go back on things that you're feeling pretty bummed out about, then that's okay because that's a natural cycle and ebb and flow of life. And the challenges are going to allow you to be closer to yourself, to allow you to see more of your patterns and to understand them better, because it's all about understanding and it's all about integrating different things into your life, things that make you happy. You're not doing anything wrong. You're doing all the right things that you need to be doing, especially if you're trying to improve yourself. Or if you're thinking about improving yourself and kind of working towards that little by little, you're doing all the things that you need to do in order to live a happy life. Much love to you, and I wish you well on your journey.